Welcome to another episode of the Completely Cricket Podcast. Today we've got an exciting lineup of things we're going to talk about. In our first segment, we're going to start off with England versus New Zealand Test that's currently going on. By the time you've watched this, it's probably going to be finished, but we're going to look at day 1 to 3 and analyse what happened. There's some interesting innings and some poor batting by England as usual, but also some, on the other side, some good batting and good bowling by both teams. So there's a lot to talk about. And also there's a couple of new players who play, including Matt Parkinson. We're going to look at him a little bit. So yeah, we'll talk about him versus Jack Leach and some just generally what's been going on in that test and key performances. And then we're going to look at, in our second segment, we're going to look at India versus South Africa. It's a series that's going to start in, I think it's Thursday, and there are 5 T20s, I'm pretty sure, and I'm not really sure. Is there an ODI series that said? Is there?
Might be, I'm not sure.
No, I think, anyway, we're going to focus on the T20 side of it, and we're going to look at the 2 squads that have been announced for both teams, India and South Africa, and look at any surprise inclusions, and look at the form that these players are in, because a lot of them have played the IPL, especially in the India squad. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. That's what we're going to talk about. Let's get started with England versus New Zealand. So with a new captain, a new head coach, also a new kit as well, So it's been a pretty a fresh start for England, and everyone is pretty excited going into this test. Excuse me. Day 1 started off pretty well for England, and I think everyone was, really pretty much really excited for this because England got New Zealand out for 132, I think it was. So a pretty low total. It shows how England's bowling with Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson starting and taking a lot of wickets. I think Jimmy Anderson taking 4, Stuart Broad taking 1. Matty as well, was the highest wicket taker in the championship, the county championship. He also took 4 wickets, so it was a very good start. So Zaid, let's look at New Zealand's first innings. What would you say if you look to pick an innings? This is pretty obvious, but what would your standout innings be, and why?
Well, I mean, obviously, it wasn't a great start for New Zealand. Obviously, high score in that team was Colin de Grandhomme, by quite some distance, apart from Tim Southee. He had a bit of fun there at the end. But yeah, Colin de Grandhomme, he was not out at the end. He scored 42. It was a really good inning, actually. He did it in pretty good time as well. He did it in around 50 balls, and that's a pretty good strike rate for Test match cricket. Also considering that the top 5 or 6 batsmen really struggled, and when he came in, he scored pretty low. So it shows some real character that was able to he wasn't scared to play his shots and able to get some runs, and he did it pretty quickly. And that's probably the best innings in the New Zealand's first innings.
Yeah, you might be thinking 132 all out, New Zealand one of the best Test teams in the world, and then England also getting 141 all out straight after. You might be thinking, oh my God, this pitch, it must be doing loads. It was actually a pretty okay batting pitch. Excuse me. And I think we saw that because the 2 second innings were a lot longer, and batsmen will be able to, there was 2 50s and 1 century in New Zealand's second innings. In England's second innings so far, we've had 2 50s. So you can see that it is a pitch that it's able to bat on. So it's mainly poor batting as regard of the really good bowling using the pitch. So yeah, and to show how bad New Zealand's top order performed, 7 runs were scored by the top 4 batsmen, which is pretty ridiculous, especially for New Zealand as well. 7 runs out of 130. So because they pretty much collapsed top order, even the middle order wasn't really able to salvage anything from it. So it's a pretty, bad start for New Zealand. A good start for England as well. Jimmy Anderson in Lords, coming back bowling, 4 for. It's a pretty amazing bowling by Jimmy Anderson. What would you say allowed Jimmy Anderson, also Matty Potts, who took 4 wickets? What do you say each of their key elements of their performances were? What would you say one thing about each of them? Key thing that they did that got them those 4 wickets.
Well, firstly, I think it was the best possible start, really. That gave both of them a lot of confidence. Also, someone like Matty Potts, he definitely when he came onto bowl, New Zealand were in all sorts of trouble already, and I think that's allowed him to showcase what he can do. He didn't need to worry about the score or how many wickets are down. He could just do what he normally does, and but neither of his bowlers are they're not express pace. They're just all about Anderson for many years now, all about excellent swing, excellent line and length, and just Test match and consistency. I think both of these bowlers showed excellent consistency. And then, Matty Potts had an amazing start. You got Kane Williamson now, which was probably, a dream start, getting the New Zealand captain out. So, both these bowlers, I think, were really, really consistent. I think, just having the support of, other bowlers around them and, everything that's going on in the match, I think that really helped them, showcase what they can do.
Yeah, no, I agree. The key difference between Jimmy Anderson and Matty Potts is that Matty Potts is more of a hard line length bowler. He sort of, he doesn't bang it into the pitch, but he doesn't really pitch it full. And he bowls like 80, 82 miles an hour. And Jimmy Anderson got ranges between 78 to like 84 roughly. But he's not afraid to pitch it up and to get it nice and full, because obviously he swings it both ways. So yeah, Matty Potts looks like, if we were to think of the future, I think he looks like a good successor for either Stuart Broad or Jimmy Anderson. Probably Jimmy Anderson retiring first, but Matty Potts, Ollie Robinson could be our like two strike bowlers for the England team in the coming few years. But yeah, Matty Potts look good. So there's not really much to talk about the first innings of New Zealand, except for obviously batting just completely collapsed. 7 runs top order. Colin de Grandin scores. Tim Southey, you mentioned, 26 off 23, I think, swung the bat a little bit. Yeah, so there isn't too much to talk about. So if we go to England's first innings, they didn't do too much better than New Zealand. They only scored 9 runs more, 141. When you've got a team 132 all out, you're really thinking, we can put a lot of pressure on them, get a lead of at least 100, 150. That would really mean that the New Zealand would really suffer, and they'd have to get out of the hole basically. It'd be difficult. But yeah, England didn't do too much. 9 runs lead, not very significant. Zaid, what do you think stopped England from scoring that many runs? Like, what key aspects? Was it the bowling? Was it their batting? What would you say?
I mean, well, England, they had an excellent start to their batting. Alex Lees and especially Zach Crawley, he got, I think, 43 or so. And then, someone like Zach Crawley, he always has an excellent start, but then he's often just not able to capitalize, not able to convert that start into, a big score. And I think, he got like 43 or 56 or so, and that was a pretty good inning, an excellent strike rate as well. But he just got out, and he got out by just fishing that one outside off, which wasn't really necessary. And I think the England were like 64, and that was an excellent start. They're probably thinking we can push for at least 200, maybe 250, but then they just had a collapse. And I think all their batsmen really were just sort of playing up balls that weren't really necessary. I think a lot of them just were just trying to, just getting a bit ahead of themselves and just hurrying through really. And I think, probably that's not necessary at all, obviously. But also, I think, tail enders, I think New Zealand's tail, they scored more runs than England, which is often, that can also cause a difference, because you always have your top order that, there's often not really much of a difference with your top order with two excellent teams. But it's often the tail, really the tail is just there to swing the bat and maybe have a bit of fun, try to get as many runs as possible. But, England really, their tail doesn't really score that much. Obviously, Jack Leach can get a few runs, but he isn't playing. So I think that's another difference that can, add some more runs or decrease more. So I think that's why England really struggled after an excellent start in that innings.
Yeah, I just think, see, the issue with England is that when you've got a bad or a very, a top order that can crumble so easily, and a middle order that can't, hold the weight down of the top order, not scoring, they can't, compensate for it. You've got to have a lower order that can at least, guarantee you 30 to 40 runs per innings, because realistically, it's test match cricket. Every time, in most matches, but you lose 40 wickets, a team loses 20 wickets, 10, two sets of 10. So it's going to go down to the last batsman, and those batsmen need to be able to be relatively comfortable with facing balls. A lot, especially in Test match cricket, unless you got someone like Jofra Archer bowling, the bowlers aren't too fast. Like, obviously, from our perspective, we can't really say very much, but like from an international perspective, 80 miles an hour isn't too bad. So you really want to see these batsmen like number 7 to 11, if they can collectively contribute, 50 runs, as New Zealand's lower order batsmen did in their first innings. That's not even including Colin Granholm batting at 7, his 42. So if you include that, it's 92 runs. That's a huge amount, and that really helped New Zealand get to a significant total. So England need to look at that. They've got to. New Zealand can bat till 7 is Colin Granholm, 8 is James, 9 is Southey. They can bat till 9, 10 at least. So with England, we can bat to 6, 7. Even Ben Foakes has been struggling. We're going to talk about this later, but Joe Root in the second innings has to sort of get doesn't give Ben Foakes too much strike, sort of shepherding the strike, because he knows Ben Foakes is very liable to get out to these bowlers. So we need to be able to bat longer. That's something that we have to really look at and get some. Even if we sacrifice a bowler or a bowling ability, as long as we get a batting that can last for longer, I think that'll be a lot better for us. But yeah, so that's pretty much England's first innings. I guess obviously Zach Crawley, you talked about him. We're going to talk about the second innings as well, because he's going to really he's probably annoyed that he didn't score 50 or even 100 in the first innings, because he was looking amazing. 43 or 56. He was driving through the offside very well. He wasn't ever looking too shaky at all. So that's something that, as an opener, that's really important. So yeah, Zaid, do you want to talk about New Zealand's second innings?
Yeah, so New Zealand again started poorly. They were at that stage, I think they were around 38 for 4. And again, England were looking excellent. They were looking like they were gonna, probably looking for the win on that day. But then New Zealand's 2 batsmen, Daryl Mitchell and Tom Blundell, came together and scored. They had a 200 partnership or something like that. And it was an absolutely amazing innings, really. But both of them, they were just they weren't really going too hard. Both of them, they had strike rates around 50. So, they just knew they needed to steady the ship and just reset after, first 4 wickets lost pretty quickly. So, and Darren Mitchell ended up scoring 100. So I think it was 108 or around 200 balls. And Tom Blundell, he just missed out on his 100. He scored 96. So both of them, they got their got New Zealand to around 240 or so for 4, and then both of them fortunately got out. But then after that, see, there was, as you say, you want to have a tail that can score runs. Again, it was Tim Southey who scored in the 20s. He got 21. So, and the rest of the batsmen just crumbled. There were 2 golden ducks. Colin Granholm got out for a golden duck. He was run out. And Kyle Jamieson also got out for golden duck from Stuart Broad. So that was really a bit of a shame, really, from New Zealand. They started poorly, but then Mitchell and Blundell continued really well and got them to a huge score, and then the rest of the battle just really collapsed. So they ended up getting to 285 all out. Still a good total, but we'll talk about it in the second innings.
Yeah, so day 3 it was when New Zealand came out to bat, looking in a pretty strong position, around 250 for 4. This was the morning, and Stuart Broad comes in with a spell of 3 wickets in 3 balls, 1 run out, 2 of his own wickets, and that pretty much derailed the progress of New Zealand. They were probably looking to set at least a total of 350, considering how well 2 batsmen were looking, Daryl Mitchell, Tom Blundell. And so from then on they collapsed, and that luckily, well, not luckily, but more like, after some good bowling in the morning with a new ball as well, England managed to restrict New Zealand to have a lead of I think 280 or something, which is a pretty chaseable with nearly 2 whole days to bat. That's a pretty chaseable total. So Daryl Mitchell scored a century, Tom Blundell 96. So if you look at Daryl Mitchell and compare it to New Zealand's approach, Daryl Mitchell and Tom Blundell's approach in the first innings of New Zealand batting, what do you think was different? What would you say is, in terms of how did he score more runs now than before?
I mean, well, I guess it's interesting because both New Zealand and England, struggled in their first innings, got out for a fairly low total, and then both the teams, we'll talk about in the second innings in a minute, but both the teams, batted really well in the second innings that they played. So that might have shown that maybe the pitch improved, which is a possibility, but I don't think that was a huge factor, because New Zealand still had a batting collapse at the beginning. But I think Darren Mitchell, he sort of just, as I said, he didn't have a big strike rate. He had a strike rate around 50. So he realized that they still had three whole days to go, and that and they only need to fit in 2 innings, so they can bat for at least a day, maybe a day and a half, maybe 2 days if they really push it. But he realized that, and that meant that he doesn't need to go quickly at all. He doesn't need to look for runs. Colin de Grandhomme, he was sort of looking for runs in his innings, in the first innings. But Daryl Mitchell, he was just calm batting, and I think that's really excellent from him. And we haven't seen him play Test cricket in the last few years. He's still fairly new to it, and I think it's really a good, excellent statement. It's showing that he's just scored 100. That means he could be he's probably solidified his position at 5 now, definitely, I think. And it was an excellent innings. So I'm really excited to see him progress, but I think it was just a really calm innings, and he realised he didn't need to go quickly.
Yeah. See, with New Zealand, I think it's the top order is pretty good. You've got Kane Williamson, obviously, averages like 53 in Test cricket. You've got Tom Latham, who's pretty good. And so you have a good top order. But I think it's the middle order that really pushes them aside from any other team. 5, 6, 7, 8. 5 is Daryl Mitchell, who's a batting all-rounder, who can bowl, actually. He's sort of like a Colin de Grandhomme, but a little bit faster type bowler. 6 is Tom Blundell, keeper. Keeper and batsman, he can bat as well. 7 is Colin de Grandhomme, which is who's a bowling all-rounder, I think. But he can actually, he showed he can bat. And 8 is Kyle Jamieson, who is a bowling all-rounder as well, who has a slightly lesser batting ability, but has scored 50 before in Test cricket. So, excuse me. So it really shows, they have a lot of flexibility. If one batsman, if they need to go out with bowling in terms of bowling, they can bowl from 5 can bowl. So you've got a load of bowlers in case someone gets injured. If you need to bat, you can bat deep. So that's something that England don't really have. We're quite rigid in terms of the. We don't really have a proper all-rounder. Like Ben Stokes is your all-rounder, but apart from him, we don't have another fluent all-rounder who can bowl and bat really well, or bat as well as they can bowl, pretty much. And New Zealand have 2, possibly 3 of them, so that shows their flexibility and versatility, and that really allows them to win games where they need to bowl very well or need to bat very well. And it allows them; they don't need to change their squad to reduce a bowler and a batsman in, because they have the ability there already. So yeah, that's something that I think England really need to look at. But there aren't too many England all-rounders on the circuit who can bat nearly as well as they can bowl, or bowl nearly as well as they can bat. So yeah, also New Zealand second innings, we saw Matt Parkinson bowling and took his first Test wicket. Honestly, if watching him bowl, I think there were 2 key things that disappointed me. One, obviously, as a leg spinner, it's harder to control the ball than it is as an off spinner. I think that's a pretty accepted fact. Would you agree with that, Zaid?
Yeah, I would, because it's sort of, you're moving your wrist around a lot, so it sometimes becomes a little bit difficult to keep that control of the ball. Whereas with off spin, it's just just a little bit. You get less turn as an off spinner because you're not using the wrist; you're just using the fingers. But it's still a bit easy to control. So we don't normally see that many wides with off spinners. But yeah, I would agree that it's a little bit difficult to control. It's harder to control leg spin than off spin.
Yeah, because Jack Leach was originally playing this Test, but then he got when he was fielding, he landed on his head, I think, and got concussed. So Matt Parkinson was a like-for-like substitute, because left arm off spinner, right arm leg spinner. So as a leg spinner, Matt Parkinson, he did. Honestly, I think it was just if I were to look at his long-term Test credentials, I wouldn't put him in my Test team. I don't think so, just because he doesn't have enough control over where he's going to bowl it. And in 6 balls, if you wanted it to get a certain spot, he can't really build up pressure, because I think he could do 4 maybe, and then 2 would be like wide outside off and could be hit. And another thing is his speed. He's bowling around like 43, 44 miles an hour. So do you think that's okay for him as a leg spinner, or do you think he needs to pitch it up? Sorry, not pitch it up. Increase his speed, and what would the benefits be of both?
I mean, yeah, I'm not happy at all with his pace. Even people our age can get it at that pace, which is that's why don't we just play international cricket? He's just obviously in this game there hasn't been that much turn on this pitch, I think. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage to him. But still, if he's bowling that slow, he's got to keep that. Someone like Shane Warne, he bowled pretty slow, but he had an excellent consistency. And also, I think Shane Warne, he still bowled faster than this. He bowled, I think, 48 or so miles per hour. But Matt Parkinson, I think it's a little bit too slow for my liking. It's pretty too loopy, and it's as you said, it's a little bit inconsistent. He's got to keep that control. And I just think, he got his first test wicket, but it was Tim Southee. Come on, Tim Southee is just, that's not really an amazing. Someone like Matthew Potts, he got Kane Williamson out for his first test wicket. That's really impressive. But Tim Southee, he was just going for it. So that's not really anything to be hugely proud. Obviously, it's the first test wicket, so excellent. But I think Matt Parkinson, he's got to either maybe look increasing the speed a little bit, or at least have maybe a change of pace. Maybe maybe a ball that's a little bit quicker, and then he can bowl the slow balls if he needs to. But I think his bowling is a little bit too slow. I don't really like it.
Yeah, I just think realistically in Test cricket he's lucky because they're not. No, if he's bowling tonight, someone like Ben Stokes, he would get absolutely smashed because Ben Stokes would come down the wicket. Daryl Mitchell, Tom London also tried to come down the wicket. They did hit him a little bit, but they not too much because a lot of the time they're just defending it. But realistically, if he were to play shorter formats and he's bowling this slow, I think a lot of batsmen, he's just giving way too much time for them to decide. With Matt Parkinson, you can decide to come down, and then if you really wanted to stop, and you could go back and change. Like it's just too much time, and that's something that's worrying because in Test cricket he's lucky people are defending him. But if he were to play shorter formats internationally, he would just get slogged. I think because he's giving way too much time on the ball. You can bowl slower than the typical 55-mile-an-hour leg spinner that you see like shorter formats, or even 60-mile-an-hour. But you can't be bowling this slow just because you're giving back the batsman too much of an advantage. If you're bowling it slow, you're turning it loads, and you have variation. It's fine. Like on a pitch like this where it's not turning too much, Matt Parkinson as a bowler needs to look at different times, different variation. Can I keep, or at least let me put pressure on the batsman? If Jimmy Anderson's bowling and it's not swinging much, doesn't mean Jimmy Anderson is immediately ineffective and there's no point in bowling him. He can still find ways to get wickets, and that's something that Matt Parkinson needs to do, I think. But yeah, let's go on to England's second innings. It's still going on as it's not finished yet. Key innings there, would you say, Zayn? I think there's only two really you can think about, but what would you say the key innings for the England's second innings as well?
Well, obviously we'll talk about Joe Root, who didn't have the best of time for first innings, but he's still not out, I think, and he's on around 80 or he's on 77, so he's batting really well, and he got a pretty decent strike rate. He's hit quite a few boundaries. So Joe Root, we there's nothing much to say. We all know how he plays. He had an excellent time in the subcontinent a couple of years ago now. He's a class batsman, so nothing much to say. But the other one would be Ben Stokes, and it's been actually a pretty decent time. After it's been a while since we've seen an excellent innings from him, so that's really really good to see. And also as captain, it's really nice to get a 50 first in your first Test match as captain. So that'll be he'll be very happy with that. Also, I think from Ben Stokes, he hit 3 sixes. So that shows that he's got the intent as well. So that's really impressive. So those are probably the two standout performances so far for me in England's innings.
Yeah, Ben Stokes is probably going to be annoyed. He could have kept going, and I think he was looking to score a century just because he had started. He held down the fort for a while and then started, really started to go for it. There was also he was quite lucky because there was a no ball call. Because he got out actually to Colin de Grandhomme. He was skipping down the wicket trying to smash it, and there was a no ball, but then otherwise he would have been bowled, and then I think England would have been in a really worrying situation then. So we're lucky for that. But yeah, Joe Root, I think the thing that really impressed me was the way he batted in terms of maturity. Like, everyone knows he's a very good batsman, but he was batting smartly rather than trying to score as many runs as he could, because he realized that Ben Foakes, who was looking susceptible, isn't your best. He's a decent batsman. He can bat, but he's not a very good. He wouldn't be able to survive very long with these bowlers. So Joe Root was rotating the strike, getting himself on strike as much as possible. To be fair, Ben Foakes did last scored 8 runs off 45, so he lasted 45 balls. But Joe Root was being smart and making sure that he was getting the strike back. So then he could continue pushing because Ben Foakes wasn't really in a position to start scoring. So yeah, Joe Root's strike rate of 60, pretty impressive for this innings. And I think this could look like a standout innings, but he's got to be able to. England needs 66 more runs. He needs to be able to carry it through to the end. But yeah, so overall, so far, been a really interesting test. I think there's just been some good bowling, good batting, and for me, I'm especially, my I'm really happy for New Zealand's Daryl Mitchell and Tom Blundell. I think they both deserve to score well. They batted really well, and those are probably the two best examples of good batting. But yeah, England should win this test. 66 runs needed. They've got 2 whole days to bat, but you never know. You never know. It could be New Zealand, if they take 1 wicket and get either Joe Root or Ben Folkes out. They have England's tail is exposed, so they can just easily run straight through our tail. But yeah, anyway, that's it for the first segment. We're going to shortly start the second segment, which is all about India versus South Africa series, T20 series. Anyway, yeah, that's the end of our first segment.